Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's share some paradigms. And the paradigm I'll share today concerns the anti-Christian effect and George Bush. So, one of the things that I have found in my research is that there is an anti-Christian perspective among white progressives. And what's interesting is how this perspective is tied to other attitudes, most notably racial attitudes. So what I'm finding is that the racial progressive attitudes of white progressives is tied after I've used regression controls, is tied to their anti-Christian attitudes. Why is this? Well, I talk about this in my paper, and I'm linking a paper in the description where I document this. And I think that there's some reasons for it. I think that part of it is a cultural war thing and looking for allies. And to me, it's part of what makes white progressives who they are today. The question is, when did this happen? When this occurred? Now, I'm working on a project. It's not published yet, so I can't link you to it, but I think I have some insight. So let's think about this. This animosity that white progressives have tied to conservatives, this predates Trump. I know there's a temptation to think everything emerges with Trump, and Trump definitely has impacted our society, and for some people for good, for some people for bad, for others mixed. No doubt about that. But this didn't emerge at Trump, just as Trump came about. This had been going on before Trump. So let's not think that Trump is the source of this tie. Maybe he's deepened the tie. That's a possibility. I don't have data to show that he has, but he's not the source of this. Indeed, this sort of tie, this tie between anti-Christian bigotry and racial attitudes, that was before 2016. That was before 2012. And in fact, when I look at a series of surveys, what I find is 2004 is the key year. Before 2004, you had at what we call a bivariate level, like a correlation. You had a correlation between racial progressive attitudes and anti-Christian attitudes. But that's not surprising, because if you think about it, both of those attitudes are attitudes we expect from political progressives. So you can find all sorts of interesting ties. You can find a tie between, let's say, abortion attitudes and attitudes towards Israel, or death penalty attitudes and environmental attitudes. That does not mean that these things are related to each other. And in fact, when you control for political ideology, they tend to go away. So having this bivariate relationship was not important. What happened in 2004 was, after controlling for not just political ideology, but a scope of other social and demographic variables, this perspective of anti-Christian attitude and progressive race relations endured. And it has endured to this day. This makes me think that something happened around 2004 to create this linkage. So that's what I know quantitatively. That's what I know from the data. I have to speculate what might have happened in 2004. So here's my speculation. I think 2004, think about it, it was the end of George Bush's, the Jr.'s, first term. What was George Bush known for? More than his father, more than Reagan, more than any other Republican candidate that I knew of, he was known for having faith. Now, other candidates, both on the left and the right, they're Christians, they say they're Christians, so forth and so on. George Bush came off as being a born-again Christian, an evangelical Christian, even though I don't think he went to an evangelical church. So now the Republican standard bearer is seen as a conservative Christian. And the animosity that white progressives may have towards political conservatives is also now tied to religious aspects they tie to Bush. Bush's first presidency sets up this tie, I believe. And during that presidency, you had no shortage of controversies. Towards the end of it, there was already war fatigue. There was the feeling that the war in Iraq was a racial war, that whites were going after brown-skinned people. I was alive and aware of what's happening at that time. I remember those discussions. So racially, there's this tie here. The cultural war was in full force. This is before Obergefell. This is before other rulings that seem to weigh the cultural war in the favor of progressives. So all this is tied to Bush, which is then tied to conservative Christians. And as a result of this, I think we begin to see that white progressives associate the conservative Christians with a hostility towards racial minorities, and also may begin to perceive the chance of picking up racial minorities as possible allies. So I believe it's Bush. It's clearly not Trump. It's clearly not Trump. I believe Bush is the catalyst, which is ironic because Bush had a reputation of reaching out more to people of color than almost any other Republican candidate at that day. Intentionally reaching out. If I remember correctly, he won about 40% of the Hispanic vote, which at that time was unheard of. But his identification as conservative Christian, I think, sets off this tie. I believe that to understand white progressives today and the issues surrounding them today, we have to understand this anti-conservative Christian attitudes. There are things we don't fully understand yet. Is this a core part that motivates much of what they do? Or is this part, this anti-Christian attitude, tied to a lot of their other attitudes, part of some sort of system, where it's only a part of it? I think that's a good question. I hope to do research and time to try to answer those questions. Nonetheless, I'm convinced that this role that this anti-Christian animosity plays, I think it began around 2004. Does this share some paradigms? Paradigms about what creates white progressives and how they've come to where they're at, and this important component of it, this anti-Christian animosity, and how it may have emerged. And it may ironically emerge from one of the Republican presidents who is most open to reaching out to people of color. Well, I hope you enjoy this conversation. I hope that you may find some of my other videos useful, interesting. If so, consider subscribing and listening to some more, because I want to try to deliver more content on a regular basis. Please consider liking or sharing or telling people about this video and others. If you don't like what I have to say, you're welcome to comment. Thanks, and please come back. We can shatter some more paradigms.